And he said, "Gentlemen, I'm here to tell you about the carnage that is coming to America." Well, this was early 2008, and he saw with perfect clarity what was going to come really 7-8 months before everybody else saw it. Hey, it's Larry. Welcome to Stewarding the Wealth Transfer. Well, these are crazy times we live in, and it reminds me of a time I was in Washington, D.C. 18 years ago, and there was a guy who was like the Godfather, and he was so rich and really a smooth talking guy. He was actually humble, but I was part of a Builder 20 group. I was the least rich guy in the room, and I was worth a few million, and there were people in the room that were worth 80, 90 million. They were building between 75 and 400 homes a year, the people in the room, and I'm doing 25. Our host for that event, he was invited over, and he said, "Gentlemen, I'm here to tell you about the carnage that is coming to America." Well, this was early 2008, and I had never met anybody like that. I'm absolutely convinced he was worth a few hundred million before this event, and after the event, I have no doubt he went on to be worth over $1 billion, because he saw what was happening for what it was, and he saw with perfect clarity what was going to come really 7-8 months before everybody else saw it. I didn't know anybody who knew what was going to happen. My expertise is really real estate, and I don't know everything about real estate, but I've been around the block for a couple decades, and so I have an opinion because I've experienced, or the people that I know have experienced, crazy things in real estate. We've been there, done that, and it's not hard to see when you've been hit by a truck and you hear the diesel coming around the corner, you start paying attention, where everybody else is just oblivious. They think it can't happen to them. But I'm here to tell you, I want to play the role of the man with the white hair who knew what was coming and perfectly prepared for the carnage that was coming to America. You might go, "Well, Larry, why in the world are you so arrogant that you think that you know?" Well, we have an advantage, we who believe in the prophetic, because I'm going to tell you that I think that God told me. And you need to judge for yourself whether it was really God. I would say that it was. I've had a couple of prophetic things. Am I any prophet? No, I'm not. But I've had prophetic experiences, and I didn't know how to handle them when they first started happening, but eventually was encouraged to test them and, to do the research, see if these things are true. And they've been true. And it's not a frequent thing, but it's a couple time a year thing. And so I woke up a number of years ago, I'll put right in the date, exactly the day it happened. I woke up one day to an extremely loud noise. It just scared me. I've actually had this happen 3 times. And it was Wall Street, just Wall Street. And I saw an absolute implosion across Wall Street, and I knew it was coming. And, I had it happen enough that I knew that was coming. The second one is really unique because I don't know anybody else who would know this, but they say that God speaks to you in ways that only you would understand. And I don't think most people understand what equity is, but I totally know what equity is. And I don't know if you know. And I've got another word that I don't know if you know, but I'm going to explain what that word is, and it's not really related to finance, but it's the word nuance. And the reason I bring that up is because at Ben Boot Camp, I've been asked or challenged, like, what in the world are you going to talk about at Ben Boot Camp that, that basically I don't know? And, this person was asking this question. And I liked it. I loved the challenge. He kind of threw down and he goes, "Larry, don't tell me that you're just going to have a bunch of talking heads and we're going to be sitting there in rows and we're not going to get to discuss it." And I go, no, that's not how it's going to roll. We are going to have a detailed conversation about the nuances of wealth, but I'll get to that, what that means, what I understand that to mean. Let me tell you about this second prophetic experience. I woke up to this extremely loud noise. It was just this screeching noise. And what I saw in my mind as this happened is I saw an enormous barge coming in under very rough conditions to a big cement dock that had huge rubber bumpers that were getting splashed with waves. It was kind of a as the metal barge was rubbing against the rubber. And I couldn't understand the dream or what it meant. It was really not a dream, it was a prophetic experience. And it shocked me awake, and I looked around for the barge, but I had seen it in my mind. But when I opened my eyes, I could still hear the noise when I woke up, but I couldn't see it. And then I had to think about what happened. And my wife woke up an hour and a half later, and I told her what happened. She didn't hear it, but I mean, it was so loud, it scared me. And I go, what do you think that was? She goes, well, she goes, what did you say that you knew it was related to? I go, well, I knew it was related to the equity markets, really around the world. It wasn't even just America. It was the equity markets of the whole world. And she goes, well, the equity and the bond markets are coming to a screeching halt. I go, that's exactly what it is. And so when you understand that, you may go, well, what's the equity market? What's the bond market? That's where we borrow money. That's how, Wall Street, we think of stocks, but it's really bonds that are the enormous wealth of the United States. And I understood as an investor that the equity markets, what does that mean, Larry? That means that when the banks fail, and I believe that banks are going to fail, and I'm not the only one saying that, and I'm not even talking about banks because I haven't had total clarity. To me, when I see Wall Street fail, that means banks are going to fail. But because I remember 1987, I remember 1999, I remember 2008, those are the three huge crashes that I have saw as I was never prepared for any of those, but I saw them, and I remember the emotion, especially of 2008. And you think that was a big emotion, get ready for a far greater emotion. Kim Clement prophesied about the conditions that the dinar was going to be revalued in, and we're approaching it on a number of ways. He said that there's going to be a great surrender, and that really means that a number of Arab countries are going to surrender to Israel. My friend, who is Nick the Greek, is served our country for years, talks about, most countries can't equal one carrier group, much less, three around the little country of Israel. That such an imposing force that any country around them is defenseless to the overwhelming power that I guess that we possess in that way. But we're going to see, according to Kim Clement, at the time of the dinar, a great surrender. We're also going to see the dinar revalue at a time when the Dow races towards 20,000. And you might go, well, that's impossible, because the Dow's like 42. It had a horrible day. I mean, the stock market's getting hammered, but come on, Larry, don't tell me it's going to go to 20,000. It's still like 41. I mean, it's fallen over 1,000 points today, but are you saying it's going to go another 20,000 down? Yeah, that's what I'm expecting. But people don't want to hear the truth, and you go, well, Larry, your view of the truth is way different than what I would say. How can you make these audacious claims? Well, I've got a prophetic perspective, I've got a personal historical perspective, and then I've got a degree of professional perspective on world events. And so it's so interesting in these times that so many professionals who even know far more than I do. I'm not an expert in world finance. I know how to borrow when you live in a small town. I know how to borrow even tens of millions of dollars. That's kind of my niche. I was so excited the first time I did $1 million, and then it gets bigger, and you learn how to do more. You got to do baby steps at first, and then it becomes pretty easy to do what used to be so hard, or literally was even impossible. But a second thing is, when you've been around a long time, you've seen more, and you kind of understand, what's going on. And so I went back to my normal builder coaching group. It's called the Builder 20 group. It's something I would love to see emulated in the kingdom of God, because we need to, in the kingdom, we need to be educated by the best people, and we need to have fantastic networks where we can have candid conversations about what's really going on. And so I'm willing to throw what I think is going on out there. I'm not really bringing this. I think the prophetic perspective is a valid perspective. I'm not necessarily prophesying this. You might go, well, you're just a chicken. Well, I can't be a prophet if I'm not a prophet, but I've had prophetic experiences, and I think that they're valid, and they allow you to think outside of what other experts are thinking, because I'm telling you, as I think a highly knowledgeable person about what Kim Clement has prophesied about economic things. In fact, I'd sit down at the table with anybody and have a debate with what Kim Clement said about financial matters. And, it doesn't mean I'm always right, but I have an opinion. And he saw very difficult times coming for America, but I believe, the way I understand it, it will look far worse than the way that it ends up. And I believe that the dinar is going to be part of the solution to the problem. And we have a president, and I mentioned it before, Donald Trump told Laura Ingraham on an interview that we had $35 billion worth of the dinar, and one of the comments on the channel was, Larry, you don't know if that is US dollar, 35 billion in US dollars dinar, or just 35 billion dinar. Well, our multi-billionaire president isn't going to brag to Laura Ingraham on national news that, hey, America's got $46 million face value of Iraqi dinar. He doesn't even fart around talking about 50 million, because it's not really an issue when you're worth a multi-billion. He's talking about the United States has $35 billion worth of the Iraqi dinar, and if they revalued, like I expect them to, at $3.50, I think it's, I don't know, is that $100 trillion? I can't do the math in my head for that. It's a whole bunch of money, and I believe it's going to really help America to do well. But let's just talk about what people are seeing, and what my perspective is, because I had the experience in early 2008 of being in a room with a guy that was like the Godfather, and he was so confident and painted such a clear picture of what was going to happen, and I did not want to hear. Nobody in that room wanted to hear what he said, but he literally killed our builder group because I quit after what he said. I was just squirming in my chair. I was so unprepared for what he clearly knew was coming. And he goes, are you guys seeing the carnage that's going to happen? Can you see it? And he was a lot older. He was an old guy. He was 10 years older than I am right now. And, I was in my 40s. We said, what do you see? He goes, I'm seeing a fracturing. I see the whole thing collapsing. And so some of the smarter guys in the room go, well, what are you doing to be prepared? He goes, well, I've called some of my hedge fund buddies, and so far we've got $1.5 billion allocated to buy up failed projects. And at that time, $1.5 billion was so unfathomable to me. I didn't, I never at that point met a billionaire. I'm sure this investor became a billionaire, because what happened in 2008 is that land fell 90%, and houses and everything, and this guy was perfectly positioned because he saw what was going on. It was like many of you are positioned and have faith for what's coming, and I think you're going to be handsomely rewarded. And some of you don't see any opportunities at all, and you might be really frustrated. You might be going, well, I've been buying XRP, and man, I paid nearly $3 for XRP, and now it just fell under $2, and it's barely, and I want it to go up, Larry. Well, my friend, silver-haired friend that I met in Washington, D.C. was waiting for prices to go down, and he was going to jump in when those prices went down. And as an experienced investor, I hope that's what you're waiting for too. It's irritating and frustrating, but I want to be an encouragement, but I want to tell you your assets are going to go down, so this is not the time to have things on margin. But I want to be encouraging, because on the other side of this, you know, we've had prophetic insight of so many things. I'm going to bounce around to a bunch of prophecies. I'm not going to try to support them all as much as I have. But I remember when Robin Bullock was talking 4 years ago about, you're going to see exposure in America. You're going to see the financial system ripped open, and you're going to see ugliness like you've never seen. And now that all makes sense, but I thought, what's there to see? You know, Doge is exposing thing after thing after thing, but there's so many layers of horrible things that are happening that people don't understand. But what I believe is going to happen is that we've got these evil systems in America where people are manipulating things behind the scenes, and they profit from our demise, and they raid our 401ks and different things if you've got those, and then they manipulate it, and then they buy stuff up, and they go petition to Congress, who are all bought off, and they salvage these horrible companies and these dirty banks who are ripping us off. I mean, the Congress makes rules that you have to use your 401k in this way and this way. You should be able to invest in whatever you want, but you have to pay somebody to manage your assets. And if you don't have more than so many $100,000 assets, you just get the A plan or the B plan. And they just basically, it's like they leverage your 401k, they put it in a barrel, and then they allow Wall Street to be over the top of the shotgun, pointing their gun right down on the fish, and your 401k is of varying sizes, and they're shooting your 401k, stealing your wealth. And God hates that system. Now I know what Robin Bullock was talking about. God hates the system, the evil systems. It's corruption of government with Wall Street. And I believe we've got a president that's on task with overseeing the led of God, that's led by those who see what's happened, and he's not going to bail them out this time. And you're going to see devastation. And you go, well, Larry, what does that mean when you see equity markets blowing up? What does that mean? Well, now this is going to scare you, but you need to be informed and know that God's got this. And I don't know how, and I don't really hear anybody speculate on what this means, but I don't hear other people talking about seeing the equities and the bond markets blow up, because they don't know what it means. But when you do a loan at a bank, the bank will usually loan 65% of the value. If you want to borrow $1 million, the bank will loan you $650,000, but you've got to come up with $350,000 equity. But if you don't have $350,000 equity, somebody has to come up with it. So you can borrow it from your folks, you can have it included in the land, or if you're really sophisticated, you can go borrow equity. And you go, well, how do you borrow equity? I want to know how you do that. Well, it's a messy process, but when you're a Wall Street insider or private equity, well, private equity means that you go secure private equity, and then you go get 60 or 65% of the loan from a commercial bank, because they're well protected, because they're getting somebody to put down 30 to 40% of the equity. They're putting down money. Well, where do they get that money? Well, they're going to insurance companies sometimes, but more often pension funds. They might go to the New York firefighters pension fund that has $2 billion in it. And these poor guys have got the job, who are overseeing their pension or your pension of it's insane that pension providers are saying you can count on getting 8.5% return on your pension. So since they can't, because you can't do that with any consistency, these equity funds will go knock on the door and talk to their friends and they'll say, hey, we want to borrow $1 billion. We're going to buy homes in California when there's this thing that blows up, and we're going to buy subdivisions and single family homes, and we want to borrow $1 billion. Well, how much are you going to make? Well, we're going to buy them for 50 cents on the dollar, and we want to borrow this money for 5 years, and we're going to pay you 9% and plus another bump of we'll give you maybe 10% of our gross profit, plus we're going to guarantee you 9.5%. Well, when they say they guarantee them if they make a profit, they'll get the 9.5%, they'll get the 9% interest. But if they don't, it's just like, well, sorry, you lose all your money because the bank that is doing 2/3 of the loan is going to be fully secured. And so private equity knocks on its Wall Street friend's door and borrows egregious amounts of money with no skin in the game. They create their investment by the fees that they generate out of thin air. They go, hey, if we're going to do this fancy deal, we need to get 5% fees on everything that comes through. And so then they have their 5% contribution of their equity. They go to the bank goes, well, you didn't put in any personal money, but you do have these fees that say you put in money, so we're going to go ahead and do the loan. And we're protected. And those poor saps that loaned out their 401k or their pension funds or that insurance company. We don't care about the insurance companies. They have so much money. And so that's how private equity blows up. And you go, well, how does that affect me, Larry? Well, you see all these restaurants that are blowing up across the country. They're not all losing money. Like, there's only 50 Red Lobsters left in the United States. One of them is in my town because it's one of the biggest money-making Red Lobsters in the country, but hundreds of them got shut down. And you may go, well, that Red Lobster's not a good restaurant. I don't go there personally even, but I have been there because we don't have any big-name restaurants in our little town. But the whole chain is going down because private equity goes and pays such a high amount, and then they borrow money for only 5 years, and every 5 years they have to churn it, and a different private equity person will stand up, and they have to pay off all the big profits that Wall Street made on that. And so that's why God, I think, hates the system that we've got. And I think the system is going to burn down. And I think if you're ready for it, it's going to be the biggest time of opportunity in history. And there's so many really smart people who don't understand what's coming. But I'm reminded of that time 17 years ago. I saw that silver-haired wise investor, and he goes, there is going to be carnage in the streets. And he was excited. And it made all of us who owed millions and millions of dollars kind of just freak out, and many of us did go broke. That's how I went broke. I mean, this guy saw me going broke. If I would have had consultation with him, I probably could have avoided it, but I had no residual income. And so you might be going, Larry, you were talking about what you're going to talk about at Ben Boot Camp. Well, at Ben Boot Camp, we're going to focus on two different things. First of all, what I've learned, and this was a question that came up through Lauren's Patreon class. They were talking to me about what it's like to be wealthy, and I explained how my income, thanks to the coaching that I got, went up 15 times, went from $40,000 a year to $600,000 a year in a 3-year period. That I was hanging out with industry experts, and that was, that was in the early 2000s. I was making that much money, so that was like making, really $2 million a year almost in today's dollars. It was just crazy to go from, just struggling to making so much money, and I didn't know how to do it. And you might go, well, how do you know how to do it now, Larry? Well, between my brother and I, we've had 5 different times where we've made way over $1 million. And I'm sad to say that I didn't learn from watching my brother do it the first 2 times how to really do it, because he and I, even though he was very clear and very open with me, I mean, I didn't have the skills or the size to become a professional athlete like he was, and he lasted a long time. He was never a phenomenal player, but he was a go-to player. He practiced with all of his heart, and coaches loved him, and so he got to play for 12 years. That's really a long time as a professional athlete. And so he made a lot of money, made millions of dollars. And then I got to see what it was like, because when you're not making, you know, 400,000 to 700,000 a year, and then you just start spending your nest egg, I watched what happens when a normal lifestyle, you still pay all these taxes and everything. And so he struggled. And then I watched him make all this money flipping houses, and he ended up making more money per year flipping houses. But I didn't have the ability to do that. I was kind of quasi flipping houses. I wanted to hold them, but I was doing 4 or 5 a year, because I had no equity. I had no money to be, I was having a hard enough time just buying these few houses, yet he was able to borrow money because he had investors, and he was making all kinds of money. And so then I got to make a bunch of money because I got this coaching. And then I lost it because of 2008, and then I got it back. And so I think that God prepared me to have an opinion and an understanding of the nuances of wealth, and that's what we're going to talk about. I don't think you need help with the investments exactly. There's been people that have been having dreams and everything about the wealth transfer for years, and I hope that you're set up. I mean, I'm sure that every month you can get a little bit more set up, but I mean, it's happening now. And I think what we're seeing just the last couple days since this tariff thing started, it's going to unleash between now, I think, and Easter. It's going to be crazy what I think happens. It's going to be exciting if you're prepared. It's going to be a white knuckle experience if you're not. What are we going to talk about at Ben Boot Camp? I want to talk about the nuances of wealth. First of all, we're going to focus on relationships, because it's who you hang out with, who you were influenced by. It's your peers that I've learned. I watched it with my brother. He's hanging out with all these other multimillionaires, and he was influenced to live at one level. And I have rich friends, I mean, rich small town friends, which are they're like the millionaire next door. I mean, you know, anybody can tell by what they live and what they drive, they've got money. But it's not flashy here in this town. You go to LA, that's flashy. People here have ridiculous money, and when you know them, then you talk to them, and you can ask people who are successful, if you're friends, and you ask them, hey, how do you vacation? How do you know how big of a house that you're going to buy? What about toys, you know? And those are things that you learn from your friends. You need to have good friends if you're going to experience the wealth transfer without regret. I don't want to be negative. I don't think you're going to get 5 chances. I think you've got one shot. You've got to live it well. Use the wisdom of other people who've gone before you, and that's what we're going to talk about at Ben Boot Camp. And so the first night is going to be about making good friends. And I did not have great social skills when I was young, and I have been very intentional about studying relationships and how men especially make friends. And I've been able to help men make friends. And we just had like a fantastic men's discipleship group that we started. We watched the movie The Forge. I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, you're a man, you need to see it. If you're a woman, you should encourage your godly men in your life, your kids, to watch The Forge, the movie. And we're meeting, and we're discipling, and we're growing relationships. And so that's one of the big emphasis, so that I believe many people who experience the wealth transfer need to have an upgrade of their friends. Secondly, you need to understand the nuances of wealth. You might go, well, what's nuances mean? Well, it reminds me of a story. It reminds me of a story one time coming back when I would, basically a week every year, I'd go spend it with my brother in the 12 years that he was in professional basketball. Many years he spent in Europe. He played in the NBA, I think 5 different years, and then 7 years in Europe or some parts of Asia. And many times he would fly me over, and then when I got married, sometimes he'd fly us both over, even one of our kids. And we got to experience what the 1% lived like when we were dirt poor pastors or whatever we were doing. And one time, a car salesman wanted to sell my brother a Ferrari, so there was a low-end Ferrari, if that's possible, but it wasn't a fancy one, but it was a sweet one. And so the guy said, hey, I'm going to meet at practice, and why don't we trade cars, Dave? I'll take your BMW home, and you drive the Ferrari, and you bring it back tomorrow. He goes, no, I'll bring it back tonight. So my brother surprised me, and we got to have a Ferrari for the afternoon. We drove around the loop around San Antonio, and we got back to the dealer, the exotic car dealer, and I'm explaining what the word nuances means. And he goes, Larry, because he was talking to me. I mean, he's such a gifted salesman. I'm just this poor pastor. He didn't know I was dressed fairly well. And he goes, Larry, what do you think about the nuance difference between the way a Ferrari drives and a Carrera 911 or a Porsche 911 drives? I mean, aren't they amazingly different? What do you understand about the nuances, Larry? And I go, well, I mean, I've never even actually sat in a Porsche. I've not got to drive. He goes, Larry, you haven't got to drive a Porsche? Well, hold on. And he comes back and he throws me a key fob. He goes, get your butt out there and drive that candy red 911 out there. And get around the parking lot, get back here in 10 minutes and explain to us the difference as you understand the nuance of a German car versus an Italian car. And so I had oh my word, I mean, a Ferrari and then a 911, which was with a big whale tail on it. And back in the day, because this was the 80s, maybe early 90s, probably early 90s. And it was a late 80s whale tail Porsche. And so I understood the nuances, because there's a big difference between a precise German car with very tight steering and a sloppy Italian car that's still a sports car, but it was not the same precise German engineering. And then I got to drive the BMW convertible, which I just thought that was like the most amazing car. So I understood the nuances of fine cars going home that day. Well, it's my opinion, after having been around wealth and yet having a hard time holding on to it, that I want to share a kingdom perspective on what I've learned and what other people who have experienced wealth. My brother's going to be there. You're going to be able to talk to him. And I know some of you, there's no way you can go, and you're going, why are you telling me about it? Because you need to know what you don't know so that you can begin to accumulate it and you can see if this might be for you. I mean, we've got about 50 that are coming so far, and I'm really happy with that number, because you don't charge a couple $100 and put it in a kind of a hard place to get to. Bend isn't the easiest place. It's not like it's Chicago or Denver or something. I mean, Bend's a little harder. You got to fly into Portland, and you drive over to Bend, or you can fly into a local airport called Redmond. But what a cool place, Bend. It's quintessential Oregon. And the second day, we're going to talk about the nuances of wealth. And when I was wealthy the first time, before that wise developer told us what was going to happen, and he was totally right, and all my millions faded away to nothing in about 8 months after he said it. Actually, it took a couple of years for it to all go away, but he knew it was coming a year in advance. But I felt like I was on a 2-story tall beach ball covered in baby oil with 5 or 6 guys spraying me with fireman hoses, trying to knock me off the top of the beach ball. It was really hard to stay up on top, and I didn't know how to keep doing it. And that's what I felt like. And so with wealth, there's your destiny. And so I want to talk about, wealth creation, holding on to it, what God's called you to do, what your destiny is, how your family is going to impact it, how the way that you budget is going to impact it, the way that you invest it, the way that you give it, the ministry that you're called to do, how you're going to behave around your friends and family. Do you need to upgrade your friends? How to not manipulate people just because you've got it. It's going to change your relationship many times with people in the church and even pastors for sure. So, that might be uncomfortable for you to hear that, but that's some of the things we're going to talk about. I'm going to have the best missionary that I've ever supported is going to be there, and I'm a huge fan. He went to Mexico with not another church in their movement, and now there's nearly 300 churches in his 42 years of ministry that are under their leadership in Mexico. They're starting churches all the time. My wife and I have got to finance starting a church. It's been one of the best investments we've done, and we've helped actually many times, and it's a guy that you need to meet. And I think that you actually could have a destiny to even help a church. And it's so great because some people have the passion, some people have the knowledge, and some people have the money. And here's a guy, Phil and Judy, have the knowledge and the passion, and with our resources, they can really make a huge difference. And the people of the world are hungry, and they focus on people who speak Spanish. And so they're in Honduras and Mexico and Cuba, and there's just amazing ministry that happens. But you'll get to understand the nuances of giving, so you'll be able to filter in your own situation, because we're going to talk about how do you give when you really need to give a lot of money. I mean, if you're giving $10,000 a year, that's great. Maybe you're giving $20,000 a year. That's pretty rare. But when you start approaching what God is going to give you the opportunity, many of you are going to give not only 6 digits, but big 6 digits. Some of you are going to give 7 digits a year to the kingdom. We're going to talk about how to do that. That's what we're going to talk about at Ben Boot Camp. And one of my friends said, Larry, don't tell me you're just going to have a talking head and we're going to sit in rows and you're going to bore us for, 8 or 9 hours a day. And I kind of was laughing when he said that, because that's a valid concern. Nobody knows. I mean, it's really important that I do a good job, and the team that I have is going to do a good job. There's going to be a number of people who are going to contribute. Lauren Atkinson is going to be the main one along with me, but there's other people besides her. And I said, no, it's not going to be like talking heads all day. We're going to sit at tables. We're going to be in groups. There's going to be instruction for 15 minutes, and then it's going to be a half hour, 40 minutes of application. How are you? And we're not going to talk about ethereal things that you don't know. I'm going to point out things that you would know, like budget. You know what a budget is. You know how to budget. I doubt you have a budget, but you do know what the concept means. But what if your income quadrupled? What would your budget for living be? What would your budget for giving be? And then I want you to sit around this table with 5 other people, 5 other guys or 5 other ladies, and you need to defend your position. So we probably will have, some really good conversation. And so that's kind of the environment. It's a learning where you prayerfully come to understand what God is calling you to do, not only via investment vehicles, but what God, the organization that He is asking you to partner with Him in building and becoming. So that's what we're doing at Ben Boot Camp. But I think it's an important thing that you should be aware of that. If you don't get to come, or you're just starting, go, God, when you're having your time alone with Him, say, God, what do you want to teach me about wealth? Because we're also going to define the difference between being rich and being wealthy. And that's an important thing. And I'm going to give you a simple definition right now. Rich people continue to work for their money, but wealthy people have their money work for them. And many of you are going to move past a job because many of you are going to be called to start new businesses. And we're going to talk about that as one who has started many new businesses. And I've just been a student of business for over 30 years. I'm super passionate about it. God's just given me an excitement about that. And I've got opinions about it, believe it or not. And I'd like to share them, but you're going to be around about a lot of other people who've got a lot of passion. And the people and the passionate people I've met as I've gone down this wealth transfer journey have been so amazing and so enlightening. And I think, I hope you get to come. But even if you don't get to come, I hope that you will be passionate about your learning and that you'll become the person that God has called you to be, and that you'll walk out your destiny with integrity and generosity. Thank you so much for listening today. Have a good one.